As a GED instructor, I thought it'd be a good idea to walk through and show you how I would handle the social studies test. So here we are on the GED website in the GED practice test, just to give us a couple questions that will show us what the real test will look like. So I approach the first question and I notice at the top here, we have pages 1, 2, and 3. There are 3 different parts to the reading for this question. So let's take a look at each one. We see page 1. Let's read the title of this chart, 4 methods of amending the US Constitution. Step 1, step 2. There's 4 different ways. But you know what catches my attention here is 1 and 2, those are the same. 3 and 4 is the same. And if I look over in step 2, 1 and 3 are the same, and 2 and 4 are the same. So that's an interesting note. As I go to answer those questions, I'll notice how similar these steps are. All right, let's look at page 2. The 17th Amendment. We've got 2 paragraphs describing the 17th Amendment to the Constitution. Page 3, this excerpt is from an article published in the Washington Times in 1908. Okay, so we see the time frame, 1908, and it's a newspaper article. All right, now before I start getting too deep into this, I like to kind of look at the questions. Which statement correctly describes an important way that the process of amending the US Constitution is different from the process of creating federal laws? Okay, so some comparing and contrasting. Question 2, which concern about the original method of selecting senators is implied in the excerpt? Ooh, excerpt. Where was that? That was page 3. There's our excerpt right there. So I know that these 2 are going to go together. Number 3, the word convention in both the chart and the 17th Amendment passage. So I need to compare page 1 chart to page 2 passage. Okay, so now I know what I'm looking for. Let's go back to question 1 and I would go through and I would read the chart, I would read the 17th Amendment, and I would read the excerpt. So let's take a look here. Which statement correctly describes an important way that the process of amending the US Constitution is different from the process of creating federal laws? So the 2 ideas here, amending the Constitution, creating federal laws. Well, I know that federal means the national government, and I'm noticing here in our text, let me get my pencil here, I see the word state, I see state legislator, legislate means to make the laws, so that's there, that's talking about the state governments versus, and there's state legislators again, seeing a lot of repetition here. All right, versus federal, which we'll do in a different color. I know US Congress, that's the national government there. Okay, oh, and there's more states. 3/4 the states, okay. So letter A, only one government branch is involved in the amendment process. Well, I see Congress, I see state legislatures, a national convention, state legislators, states. But I don't see any different branches. So I might kind of keep that one in mind as a possibility. Letter B, only one legislative body can conclude the amendment process. That looks pretty good. The word conclude, I know that like conclusion from my reading class means to finish. So that's a possibility too. So we'll leave that one on the table. Letter C, only state legislators are involved in the amendment process. Well, there's that word state, but over here we have Congress, which is federal. So we know that one's incorrect. Letter D, only state governments can start the amendment process. So start, that's going to be step 1. Well, I look in step 1 and US Congress, that's not state. So I know that one's incorrect. So that leaves me with 2. So let's take a look and see which one of these is correct. Now, Let's look at letter B. Only one legislative body can conclude the amendment process. So conclude, that's going to be our step 2 here. So it can be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislators or ratified by ratification conventions of 3/4 of the states. So notice the difference there. Legislators, state legislators, and states. So this is not the legislator over here. This is just the state government. So only one legislature? Nope, that one can't be right. So process of elimination, we know that letter A is correct. And if we go up here, we can actually look at the explanation from GED, and it does tell us that letter A is the correct option. All right, question 2, but still with the same reading. Number 2, which concern about the original method of selecting senators is implied in the excerpt? So we go to the excerpt here, which is this one, because here's that word excerpt and that word excerpt. Now, the word implied, that's kind of a reading vocabulary word. If it's implied, it means it's not stated directly. We kind of have to read between the lines. So let's take a look at our different options here. So let's look at the reading here. The senator said the reasons for this reform are thoroughly well understood. It will prevent the corruption of the legislatures. It will prevent men buying a seat in the Senate and make the Senate more responsive to the will of the people. It will also make candidates campaign before the people. So we're looking at the original method, one of the problems. So letter A, it failed to limit the influence of the wealthy. Well, that word wealthy, we kind of mentioned it, buying a seat. I don't have enough money to buy a senator. It would require a rich person to have that money, so that wealthy person. So A looks pretty good, but let's look at the other ones. Letter B, it does not help to organize debates effectively. I don't see any mention of debates there. I think that's off topic, so I'm going to mark that one out. Letter C, it neglected to limit the influence of the majority. It doesn't really talk about that at all. In fact, it wants the majority to have the influence, the people. That's the majority of people. So I'm going to mark C out. Letter D, it did not encourage an efficient lawmaking process. That might be true, but I really don't have evidence of it in here. So I'm going to mark out D. I do have evidence about this idea of wealth and money. Buying a seat, that requires money. So I think the answer is going to be letter A. And we can check our answer explanation. And it does say that A is correct. Question 3. What does the word convention mean in both the chart and the 17th Amendment passage? So the chart is here, the word convention, let's highlight it. We have conventions, conventions, convention, and convention. So a national constitutional convention called by 2/3 of the state legislature, or ratified by ratification conventions in 3/4 of the states. So, okay, state legislators, states, and then the other one that we need to look at is the 17th Amendment, which was here. So let's look for the word convention in this one, and I see it at the very top, convention. So the purpose was to ensure that the interests of the states were represented. Okay, let's take a look at our options here. So a cultural tradition. We're talking about government here, not really culture. So I don't see the connection there. A formal assembly. Well, assembly, assemble, put together. Well, formal, that's usually talking about the government. So let's leave that one. An agreed upon contract. Well, they are negotiating, so maybe that's a possibility. Letter D, preferred writing style. We're talking about creating the government, so I don't really think we're talking about writing here. So now I've got two possibilities that we want to kind of break down. We have formal assembly and agreed upon contract. Now, they are kind of putting together some groups to agree on things. But if we look at the use of the word convention, especially, let's go back to page 1 here. So we are agreeing to do something. How do we agree? By a 2/3 vote, by a national constitutional convention. I think it's going to be a formal assembly. Because in the United States, we like to vote on things. So we have to come together as a state or as a state legislature and agree to vote. So I think it's the actual action of coming together. So let's check our answer here. And we are correct. It is B, a formal assembly, coming together. All right, let's look at our next question here. Women's voting rights. Always read the title first. Okay, so we have a paragraph here, and then we have a chart. And I noticed the chart says number of women in the U.S. House of Representatives, 1917 to 2011. And I look at the line, and the first thing I notice is it's going up. Cool. Let's look at the question to see what information we need to know. What do the passage and graph indicate about the United States in the 20th and 21st centuries? 21st century, that's now, so 20th was the one before, so that's the 1900s. Okay, got a time frame ready. So what information can we get from the paragraph and the chart? Well, let's look at the paragraph. Since the 19th century, many people have worked for equal rights for women. Much of this effort focused on suffrage, which is the right to vote. One of the greatest victories for advocates of women's rights was ratification of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1920. The 19th Amendment stated that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. However, the struggle for equality in other areas of society continued even after the 19th Amendment granted women suffrage. So the important things I'm noting from this paragraph, all right? So the women's rights, 1920, so on the account of sex. So they cannot deny you your right to vote based on your gender, based on if you're a man or a woman. But then I see this word, however, the struggle for equality continued. So just because women earned the right to vote didn't mean the problems went away, all right? And then I notice here in the chart, I can see the numbers here. So let's scroll down just a tad. So the session of Congress, so the 65th session, which is probably the early 1900s, because it says 1917 here. And then it's all the way to 2011, which is pretty close to now here. So the number looks like it starts about 0 and it goes up to about the 70s. Okay, so let's look at our answer options here. A, social movements halted inequalities within society. So the word halt, someone says halt, means to stop. So stopping inequalities. So we completely made everything equal. I don't think we're quite there yet. So I think we can say that A, because we know that the struggle continued. The struggle continued, that means it's not been halted. The inequalities still exist. Letter B, the changes in voting rights impacted representation in the US government. Well, the voting rights changed in 1920. The numbers after 1920 started going up. So there may be some connection there. Let's leave that one. Letter C, democratic principles are more powerful than cultural traditions. Well, we are talking about democratic principles, voting, cultural traditions, the role of women in society. But do we see that more powerful? I don't see any evidence of that. There's nothing that really talks about the democratic principles being all that more powerful. So I'm going to mark that one out. Letter D, the Civil War amendments created democratic opportunities for women. Civil War. I think the Civil War was kind of a long time ago. Maybe like the 1800s. This is talking about the 1900s. I think that's the wrong era. I don't think Civil War is the appropriate time period here. So process of elimination, I only have one left. It's B. And if we look at our answer explanations, it is B. We are correct. So by changing the women's right to vote, there are now more women in Congress, which makes sense. As women had more power in democracy, they wanted to play a greater part in our democracy and in our government. So letter B makes sense. All right, question 5 continues with this. And so it's going to ask us, we got this little box here. And whenever I see that box, I know I'm going to type. So it says, type the appropriate session of Congress in the box. Session of Congress. I remember that. That is part of our chart here, session of Congress. All right. The question says, the number of women representatives who served in the blank Congress was twice the number of women representatives who served in the 101st Congress. All right, so the 101st Congress, let's see if we can find that. So we see our 100, here's 101, and the number there, kind of gotta lean in close here, maybe about, what is that? Nope, sorry, we're up here, wrong one. This is a little small to read, so you kind of have to squint, but it looks like we're right here. And that's going to be just under 30. So I think we can say maybe 29. There's my 29. Okay. So let's reread the question. The number of women representatives who served in the blank Congress was twice the number of women representatives of the 101st. So we want to do that by times 2. So you do have just a little bit of math here, but if you want to round it up to 30, 30 times 2 is 60, and then minus those 2 numbers there that we added extra, or just do 29 plus 29, whatever works for you, pencil, paper, write it out, but 29 times 2 is going to equal 58. So if our number is 58, we're going to find the number 58 here. So here's 50 and 60. We're going to go over, and I see, probably about maybe right here, 58. And I'm going to go down, and that's going to be the 106. So I do 106th Congress was twice the number. We can check our answer, and the answer is 106. I have to clear my writing, but it is the correct answer, 106th. All right, and let's take a look at our next one. All right, last question to go with this chart. Which statement explains the number of women serving in the U.S. House of Representatives during the 65th congressional session? So again, we're gonna find that chart number. So 65, there's our 65, and it looks like maybe there was one woman in Congress or in the U.S. House of Representatives at that point. So let's read our answers. A, women lacked suffrage rights at the national level. Well, remember, we said suffrage means voting, the right to vote. And that's true. They did not have the right to vote early on in our government. Letter B, states use literacy tests to restrict women's voting rights. I don't know if that's true because that's not in the reading. Literacy tests, there's no mention of that. So I don't know. Letter C, women resisted involvement in politics at the national level. They resisted? They didn't want to participate? Again, maybe, I don't know. It does not say that, so I cannot say that that is true. Letter D, states prohibited political campaigns by women. Campaigns. There is no mention of campaigns in this reading, so I don't think that's true. So that just leaves us with letter A, and that is true. They did not have voting rights, therefore they were unlikely to be voted into Congress. And we can check our answer, and we are correct, it is A. All right, question 7. All right, the first thing I notice here is this little paragraph, but then I scroll down and that's a lot of charts. So the question is going to ask you, which 3 graphs relate to the concept of sustainability. I like that word, sustainability. Click on the 3 graphs you want to select. First thing I notice is this number 3. I need to pick 3 of these graphs to show my answer. So let's look at the paragraph and then figure out what graphs match. It says, the definition of sustainability is from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. Sustainability is based on a simple principle. Everything that we need for our survival and well-being depends either directly or indirectly on our natural environment. Sustainability creates and maintains the conditions under which humans, that's us, and nature can exist in productive harmony that permit fulfilling the social, economic, and other requirements of present and future generations. Sustainability is important to making sure that we have and will continue to have the water, materials, and resources to protect human health and our environment. Now, that's interesting. I notice that repeating theme of humans, our environment, or nature. So there's that connection for sustainability, that we want to make sure people have what they need, but that we protect the environment. Okay, so that must be what sustainability means. So now remember, we need to find 3 graphs. So let's scroll down here so we can see all of the graphs, and let's take a look at each one. Let's look at the titles of these graphs. The first one says, World Population Growth Through History. You see, it kind of jumps there a little bit. Well, population, that's people. So I think I like that one, but let's keep looking. Tropical area deforested from 1990 to 2005. Well, deforested, break that word down if you're not sure what it means. I see the word forest and I see D. Anytime you see the word D in front of a word, that means to take away. So we're taking away the forest. We're probably meaning that we're cutting down trees. Well, that's connected to our environment and nature, so I like that one. Let's keep going. The third one, worldwide non-immigrant visa issuances. Okay, well, that is talking about people, but I'm not sure it's connected to our environment. Number 1's talking about people, but the amount of people does affect the environment. Non-immigrant visa issuances, I'm not sure that's connected. So I think I may go ahead and just mark that one out. All right, this one, global oil consumption. Well, oil, that's part of nature. We pull it from the ground. So I think there might be a connection there. I like that one. And then the last one, U.S. representatives by region. So our government representatives. I don't see the connection to nature or the environment there. So I'm going to mark that one out. And sure enough, that leaves me with 3. So I can say 1, 2, 3 as my answers. And I can check it here. And it says we are correct. So again, make sure you look at all of the answers because it might be, some are better than others. You can do process of elimination. And making sure that you're reading the directions when it says all 3. And make sure all of the answers refer back to the reading they give you. All right, let's take a look at number 8. Now, number 8's a little different here. I look at the directions first. It says click on the 4 blue bars and drag them onto the graph to show the amount of spending on each of the 4 wars, which I see the wars, World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. So this is a very different style of question. We have to take these bars and put them in the right place. So let's read the paragraph to figure out where these go. It says, use the information below from the Congressional Research Service to complete the graph. The United States has spent large amounts of money since the turn of the 20th century to support involvement in major wars. From 1917 to 1921, the total cost of military involvement in World War I was around $20 billion. So money, I want to highlight my money as I see it. Approximately $296 billion was spent on World War II military operations between 1941 and 1945. The United States spent nearly $30 billion to wage the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. From 1965 to 1975, the year spanning the Vietnam War, the US government spent about $111 billion on military efforts. So if I match those up, the $20 billion is going to go with World War II, the 296 is going to go with, the 20 billion goes with World War I, 296 World War II, 30 goes with Korean, 111 is Vietnam. So the biggest one was the 296 in World War II. So I'm going to try this big one. I'm going to match it up to this number here. It is almost 300, and it goes in this World War II spot. So that looks like that matches. All right, the next biggest was 111. So let's try the next biggest bar. And that 111 goes with Vietnam. So I'm going to match it over here for the numbers. Oh, that's close to 200. I don't think that's right. I'm going to try the next one. And that's much closer to 100 or 111 for Vietnam. So I like that one. All right, then we have 30 billion, and that's with Korean War. So let's try this one. Oh, that's like, oh, look at that. That's like 80. I think that's too big. Let's try this one. Yeah, that's about half of 50. So that's probably about close to 30. So that's going to go for Korean War. And then 20 billion was for World War I. Well, you only got one small one left. And yeah, looks like that matches. So again, use the numbers on the side here to match the bars up to see how much that is. It's hard to see from this side exactly how much that matches up to. So move them over here and then place them in the right place. And let's see, and we can check our answers, and we are correct. All right, question 9. All right, I see two big things jump out to me as soon as I click this page. Capitalism and communism. Much of the 20th century was marked by the Cold War between the ideals of capitalism and communism. Drag each phrase into the correct box to show whether it is associated with capitalism or communism. Now, here's the one trick about the social studies test. You do have to have a small understanding of how governments work. Now, maybe you don't know a ton about communism, but I bet you know a little bit about capitalism. Where have you heard that word before? I've heard it in reference to the United States government, the United States economy, that we are capitalist society. Okay, so what does that mean for me? What does that mean for our country? Well, it means that the government doesn't control my money. So let's see if we can figure out a couple of these based on just that little bit of knowledge that you and I have in regards to capitalism and not capitalism, which is going to be our communism. So I see something like private ownership. Now, in the United States, the government does not own my house. I do. It's private. I own it. So I think that goes with us, and that's capitalism. Versus this one, it says state ownership of all property. That doesn't sound like the United States, so that must be communism. All right, competitive markets. I think we like that here in the United States, so I'm going to put that in capitalism. Let's see, profit motive. So profit means money, motive or motivation is why we do something, and I think the businesses in the United States are working towards making money, so let's put that in capitalism. Income redistribution. Income is money. Redistribute means to take it from one place and put it in another. Our government doesn't really do that very much, but a country like Russia or China, which are communists, they do that. The government controls the money. So I'm going to put that in communism. And then finally, we have classless society. Now, the easy way would be to notice that there's one space in communism left, and you can put it there. You can also know that they redistribute the income in communist societies so that people are all equal. Well, we believe in the United States with capitalism that you have to work hard for it. So there are kind of classes in capitalism. So we're going to put this one in communism. And we can check our answers, and we are correct. And so that finishes us up on the social studies practice test. The link to this practice test is going to be in the description of the video. So check it out, try it for yourself. And just remember as you walk through, read the directions, read the titles, note all of the answers, and are the answers referring back to what you just read? And that's going to help you on the GED Social Studies test.